So somehow, through all the many controversies we've experienced in the last little while through film, we've now reached the king of controversial, the ruiner of cinema as we know it, Trolls World Tour. Now, there was actually an entire section of my Cats review that was dedicated to this movie, and not even the movie itself, just the trailer, because it played before Cats, and I was like, look, I'm already here to suffer through one nightmare, don't torture me even more. Like, what is this?
It's like I'm being paralyzed by
And the fact that they played it before Cats really lets me know that they thought Cats was going to be the pinnacle of family cinema. Yeah, that's right, kids. Line up and watch Jason Derulo give out milk facials. And then go and have a threesome in a trash heap. Family friendly. Anyways. So this is the highly unnecessary sequel to the highly unnecessary movie Trolls, which I honestly completely forgot even existed until I saw the trailer for the sequel. But either way, the first one did well enough to garner a sequel, which I honestly thought just looked like a disaster based on the trailer alone. Now, theatrically, this movie probably still would have done pretty well. It's a big budget animated movie, recognizable names. That's a recipe for at least some kind of success. But then the whole world got flipped upside down, set on fire, and movie theaters closed worldwide. So what's a studio to do? Some movies had already done some kind of theatrical release, so they're like, shit, let's go to VOD so we can worry about getting some of that money back. But unreleased movies have mostly decided to delay themselves. We've seen a slew of new release dates for some of those larger titles, because for the most part, they just won't make their money back on a home platform. But Universal decided to be bold. And they thought, well, you know, lots of kids are at home, lots of parents are at home, let's just push Trolls to VOD. And oh my God, the unthinkable happened. Trolls World Tour dominated. And it makes sense. Like I said, parents are at home, kids are at home, world's shut down. But I don't think anybody really anticipated exactly how well it would do. All things considered, the sequel has managed to gross about the same amount as the first Trolls movie while running on demand in 3 weeks compared to what the first Trolls did its entire theatrical run. Now, totals-wise, the first Trolls movie did still make more money, but if you actually factor in how much Universal actually makes from VOD versus theatrical ticket sales, they've made way more money. And this is where the catalyst for the story begins. Now, if you expect this to be a review of the movie itself, that means you think I spent $20 to rent this, which I absolutely did not spend $20 to torture myself with a movie that the mere trailer made me want to put my head through a wall. I don't care that Anna Kendrick's in it. That immediately gets crossed out by the fact that Jamie Dornan is tonguing this instrument. I have given Jamie Dornan entirely too much of my time this year. I'm not doing it animated. And that's not 20 to keep the movie, that's 20 to rent it. If I wasn't gonna spend 10 bucks to watch this in theaters, I certainly wasn't spending 20 to watch it at home. And before anybody talks about the fact that I saw Cats in theaters, that was a courtesy ticket and I still felt ripped off. So if you're looking for an actual review of this movie and maybe some like, I don't know, awesome history of Trolls in general, check out LME's video. So if I'm not reviewing the movie, which I'm sure is just amazing, what's the purpose of this? Well, years from now, we might possibly be looking at Trolls World Tour as the movie that changed cinema forever. Literally, Trolls World Tour might be holding a smoking gun over the entire theater industry. And I'm not okay. Now I get it, the world is already changing in terms of how we consume movies and media in general. Streaming platforms have been getting exclusives for a while now. There are movies I've felt fortunate enough to catch in theaters at film festivals that get purchased by streaming outlets and then just get released there rather than going to an actual theater circuit, or they only get really limited theatrical release. So things were obviously changing already. But then obviously once the entire world started shutting down, you're gonna see studios adapting their marketing practices, for better or for worse. They've got movies ready to go, they've got people at home looking for something to do, it just makes sense. When it comes to the independent movies, they're kind of getting cut off at the legs a little bit. They were supposed to be getting theatrical releases in certain places, and a lot of them are just being pushed to VOD with minimal marketing, or at least more difficult marketing. And it's honestly super depressing to watch a lot of these really amazing movies just completely fade away before anyone's even had a chance to hear about them. But when it comes to the big studios, Universal was one of the first ones to really adapt to this changing landscape. They announced that they were putting Invisible Man, Emma, and The Hunt on VOD to try to increase some of their return on those movies once theaters shut down, and of course, would go on to release Trolls World Tour exclusively through VOD. And this is where the drama really starts. So I'm sure the theaters were already pretty upset at this decision. Hell, I'm sure a lot of them were upset that studios ended up releasing movies that were still in theaters on VOD once the theaters shut down because they couldn't do their full theatrical run, just because it stopped them from making money on them as well. Because while a lot of those indie films I mentioned have been splitting their VOD profits with theaters, big studios aren't so generous. But most theaters were probably just willing to take it for a bit, you know? It's a disaster worldwide, everything sucks for everyone, we're all just doing the best we can to weather this out. But then it got worse. Disney and Warner have both mentioned movies that they're planning to put straight to VOD versus putting them through a theatrical release once they open up again. The thing that really pushed this to the next level is when, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, the NBC president, Jeff Shell, said that because the success of Trolls World Tour was so great, they were going to switch to a split release format, meaning that they were going to release some movies theatrically, some on VOD, even once theaters were reopened. And AMC was like, hell fucking no. You have the audacity to say that you're going to keep doing it once we have a chance to start making our money back again? You're cut off. By cut off, I mean that AMC has actually stated that they're not going to play any more Universal movies in their theaters ever. The exact quote here being, "It is disappointing to us, but Jeff's comments as to Universal's unilateral actions and intentions have left us with no choice. Therefore, effective immediately, AMC will no longer play any Universal movies in any of our theaters in United States, Europe, or the Middle East. This policy affects any and all Universal movies per se, goes into effect today, and as our theaters reopen, and is not some hollow or ill-considered threat." Incidentally, this policy is not aimed solely at Universal out of pique or to be punitive in any way. It also extends to any movie maker who unilaterally abandons current windowing practices absent good faith negotiations between us, so that they as a distributor and we as exhibitor both benefit and neither are hurt from such changes. Currently, with the press comment today, Universal is the only studio contemplating a wholesale change to the status quo. Hence this immediate communication in response. That means no Fast and the Furious, no DreamWorks, no Blumhouse. Can you imagine a theater with no Blumhouse movies in it? Because I can't. Now, this is obviously a huge deal for everyone. AMC is literally talking about bankruptcy right now, but they're bold enough to cut off one of the biggest studios. And I get that it sucks that Universal is using an uncontrollable situation to push the flexibility that they've wanted for a while. This is a pretty intense reaction. But on the other hand, Universal also kind of needs AMC. So I live in Canada. We don't have AMC here, but I do know that I'm pretty sure it's the biggest theater chain in America. Universal's gonna need that power when they release the 69th Fast and the Furious movie once the world opens back up. But before anybody could really even stop and consider these ramifications and what Universal actually meant versus what AMC is going scorched earth over, Regal Cinemas came in hot with a warning letter to any studio that may be considering pivoting to VOD releases. Now, Universal has since clarified that they definitely still have an allegiance to the current model and that they're upset at this coordinated attempt to blackball them, which, yeah, that was a fast and furious response from AMC. That is definitely a scorched earth tactic. That's like setting yourself on fire to burn down your enemies.
See that
Universal movie?
Just go give him a hug. Go run!
Now, I'm assuming we'll get some kind of compromise going forward, and I guess there is a chance this sticks, but I just can't imagine a world where executives from both sides don't try to smooth this out in a way that works for everybody and still adapts to the changes of the world. Because I do still think both sides rely on each other. Because while it's no surprise that certain movies are going to do a killing on VOD, especially during a stay-at-home order, but a lot of other movies genuinely rely and benefit from the theater experience, from the visuals to the audio to the audience reaction and energy. There are a lot of reasons to keep theaters going. But parents spending $20 to keep their kids entertained for up to 24 hours? Yeah, that's an easy sell. $20 for someone who lives alone and doesn't get to keep it, and maybe the movie's not actually that great. That's definitely a harder push, and when you're taking in the current market of pandemic and people potentially having lost their jobs, that's even harder. Obviously, when it's a parent weighing the cost of a ticket for themselves, their kid, the snacks, and actually just getting there, that $20 is probably cheaper than going to the movies, and that's only if you take one kid and one parent. Look, I get that I like theaters way more than the average person, both for the atmosphere when people aren't being shitheads and just the fact that it's way easier to focus on a movie when I'm watching it in theaters. I also just love experiencing genuinely excited crowds. When people are so into the movie that they're watching, it makes it so much more enjoyable, and it's just a great experience to share. And I don't just mean those big moments like Endgame when everyone's super hooked on this, journey for the past 10 years. I mean even just like regular things, like just like the crowd for something like Knives Out or Jojo Rabbit was just incredible to me. And I'll be doing everything in my power to see movies in theaters for the rest of my life. But again, change is changes are obviously coming, especially when studios like Netflix are funding incredible projects like Marriage Story and The Irishman, and then only getting the backing to release them in limited theater runs so they don't go everywhere, so the average person is gonna have to watch it at home. Things are gonna shift. But a lot of people are not even going to consider spending $20 on a movie that they know once it hits VOD is gonna end up in some less than legal viewing locations. And it's for reasons like that that I don't see larger movies like Black Widow or James Bond going to VOD unless the world really goes to hell. Because the financial loss would just likely be way too significant. People will definitely watch it, a lot of them won't do it legally. And even in a scenario where theaters are fully open, if something like Black Widow or even Tenet released simultaneously on VOD and in theaters, a lot of people would actively choose to see it in theaters over watching it at home. But there's definitely a market that studios will push to VOD. Those movies that they're a bit more unsure about, maybe some independent movies that they don't want to put a full financial backing behind theatrically, kids movies that they don't expect to push for any kind of Oscar. I know that this year the Oscar is including streaming, but that's this year only. We're talking about the future. Those are the movies that I can 100% see getting pushed straight to VOD. And again, Universal isn't denying the valuable nature of the theater going experience. They're just looking to release certain things on VOD when it makes more sense for them. And honestly, if something like Trolls or like the Play Mobile movie doesn't play in my theater, that opens up another auditorium for something hopefully significantly better if the theater market doesn't completely crash and burn. But more realistically, it'll probably just get turned into another theater for a Disney movie. But that's the way she goes. In all of this, I'm honestly most worried about independent films. I'm worried that smaller creators won't get the funding they need to make their movies. I'm worried that studios aren't gonna wanna shell out the money to actually fund them or put them in theaters or distribute them in any way. Studios and theaters alike are probably really gonna wanna focus on what they perceive as guaranteed earners once the theaters actually start opening up again, which really aren't always that great. But yeah, if there's a smaller movie that you're interested in and you feel like it's just maybe disappeared off of the face of the earth, keep an eye on it. It might be on a streaming service. It might be available somewhere to rent. Support those small creators. It really does make a difference. So yeah, not only are we living through a global pandemic, but we're also living in a world where a Trolls movie has likely changed the landscape of how movies are released potentially forever. We will never be able to have a conversation about this again where Trolls doesn't come up as the catalyst moment behind all of this. The Great Theater War with a wild-haired creature standing above a burning heap of film. Or I don't know, maybe it's not that dramatic and everyone's just having a pissing match over money. Anyways, that is gonna do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comment section down below. Do you think the studios and Universal are gonna come to an agreement with the theaters and stuff going forward? Do you think that AMC is actually going to go through a period where they refuse to play any kind of Universal movie, or will this kind of be dealt with by then? Because they've said it wasn't just for show, and they said that they were prepared to stand by it, but I don't know. So I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll catch you all later.